Have you ever entered a place where every wall seems to hold a secret? Where silence isn't the absence of sound, but the presence of something yet to be said? That's exactly what I felt when I crossed the gates of Elmswood Manor. I wasn't summoned by a client, nor by the authorities. I was summoned by a letter, unsigned, unexplained. Just one sentence: a crime demands your mind. The mansion wasn't just old. It seemed alive. Each room pulsed as if it had its own memory. And when I found there wasn't just a body, it was a game. A puzzle where each piece revealed not only clues, but parts of myself that I preferred to keep buried. The investigation you're about to follow isn't about discovering who killed whom. It's about understanding why someone chose to transform the truth into a labyrinth. Prepare to join me in a story where logic and madness walk hand in hand. Where every choice has a price, and every clue could be a trap. Because when mystery calls, I listen. And today, you will listen with me. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching this video from? I want to know if I've investigated any cases there before, or if the next one could be right there. I never trusted letters without a return address. But that morning, one arrived with my name handwritten in red ink, as if drawn in anger. Inside, an invitation: come to Elmswood Manor. A crime demands your mind. No signature, no stamp. Just the heavy silence of something that had already begun before I even arrived. The mansion was located on the outskirts of a town that time seemed to have forgotten. Strangely, it didn't appear on any recent map. When I asked the locals, they looked away, as if the name Elmswood carried a weight no one wanted to touch. Still, I went. Because when mystery calls, I listen, even if the answer comes at a high price. As I crossed the rusty gates, I felt the air change. It wasn't just the smell of old wood or the moss on the walls. It was as if the house were alive, waiting for me. Each step echoed as if someone were walking behind me. And even without seeing anyone I knew, I wasn't alone there. In the main room, I found the body. No documents, no recognizable face. Just a note attached to the hand. The truth is in every piece. That's when I realized this wouldn't be an ordinary investigation. It would be a game. And I had just accepted the rules without knowing what they were. Elmswood Manor wasn't just old. It seemed to carry the weight of centuries. Built in the late 19th century by a collector of enigmas named Alaric Voss, the place was designed as a mental labyrinth. It said he believed the human mind only revealed itself under pressure. Each room had a hidden purpose, as if the house were a puzzle in itself. Alaric mysteriously disappeared in 1923 during a storm that isolated the property for days. When they finally managed to get inside, there was no sign of him, only a chessboard with an incomplete move. Since then, the mansion has been known as the house that thinks. Many have tried to explore it, but few have returned with their sanity intact. Old documents I found in local archives reveal that Alaric held secret meetings with influential figures of the time. Politicians, artists, even investigators. All fascinated by his ability to transform logic into art. But there was something more: accounts of rituals, dangerous games, and an obsession with control that went beyond what was acceptable. The mansion was closed for decades, until it was reopened by a distant heir who disappeared shortly afterward. Since then, it has been at the mercy of time and the curious. When I entered, I felt I wasn't just stepping into a physical place. It was as if I were entering the mind of someone who never wanted to be understood. The road to Elmswood seemed to stretch longer than necessary, as if time slowed down as I approached. The trees bent over the path, forming a natural tunnel that muffled any sound. When the gates appeared, rusty and half open, I felt a shiver that didn't come from the cold. It was as if the house knew I was coming and was waiting. The garden was overgrown with tall weeds and broken statues, as if time had stood still there of its own accord. Every detail seemed deliberately neglected, like a trap for curious eyes. The main door creaked open, revealing a hall shrouded in dust and silence. The smell of old wood mixed with something metallic made me pause for a second. I took a deep breath. I went inside. The interior of the mansion was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and rooms that seemed to move with the light. Crooked paintings, cracked mirrors, and furniture draped in sheets created an atmosphere of waiting. It wasn't just the emptiness that bothered me, it was the feeling that someone had left just minutes before, or was watching me now from some dark corner. In the center of the main hall, the body. No blood, no signs of a struggle, just a silent presence and a note that seemed to have been written calmly. The truth is in every piece. I looked around and realized that every object, every shadow, every detail of the house could be a clue, and that the investigation would not be done with weapons or handcuffs, but with logic, patience, and courage. The body lay there, motionless, as if carefully placed. There were no signs of struggle, no visible marks of violence. The expression on his face, too calm, made me wonder if it was really a death or a staged event. But the note held in his hand, with firm, symmetrical lettering, read, "The truth is in every piece." That wasn't just a clue. It was an invitation. I searched the victim's pockets, looking for documents, anything that would tell me who she was. Nothing. No ID, no cell phone, not even a key. It was as if that person had been erased from the world before falling there. The strangest thing? The clothes were impeccable, as if they had been chosen for a special occasion. But what occasion? Around the body, objects were carefully positioned. A clock stopped at 3:17, a still warm cup of tea, and a book open to page 47. Everything seemed deliberate, as if someone wanted me to see it exactly as it was. What if each item was a piece of a larger puzzle? A game of logic, where time, taste, and reading revealed more than they appeared to. That's when I realized this investigation wouldn't be about the who, but about the why. The killer's identity was hidden in layers, and each room in the mansion held a piece of the answer. I wasn't just facing a crime. I was facing a mind that wanted to be unraveled, piece by piece. The first room I explored looked like a guest room, but something was out of place. The walls were covered with old photographs, all in black and white, with faces crossed out. In the center, a table with an incomplete jigsaw puzzle. Only 3 pieces were missing. Next to it, a diary with pages torn out and a handwritten phrase, "Remember what was forgotten." This wasn't decoration. It was provocation. Each object there seemed to carry an interrupted story. A broken clock, a music box that played only one note, and a Polaroid with the word guilt written on the back. I began to piece together the puzzle, and the image that formed was disturbing. A room identical to that one, with someone sitting in the corner, their back turned. The feeling was clear. I was being forced to relive something that wasn't mine. The diary, even incomplete, revealed fragments of a collapsing mind, disjointed phrases, distorted memories, and an obsession with control. The victim, or whoever lived there, seemed to have constructed that space as a memory capsule, but not to remember, to hide. And each piece of the puzzle seemed to want to show me what was buried. When I fitted the last piece, a drawer opened by itself. Inside, an intact photograph, the face of the victim still alive, next to someone I recognized from an old case. A name I didn't want to remember. Memory, after all, is not only what we keep, it's also what we try to forget. And there, in that room, the past began to infiltrate the present. While analyzing the objects in the room, I began to assemble a psychological portrait of the victim. This was no ordinary person. There was an obsession with control in every detail. Everything was meticulously positioned, as if the environment needed to reflect an internal order. But this order was artificial, forced. And when the mind forces too much, it breaks. The diary entries revealed a narcissistic personality, but not in a vain sense. It was an intellectual narcissism, the belief that only he understood the world. Phrases like "they don't think like me" and "the truth is mine" appeared frequently. The victim didn't want to be understood. He wanted to be deciphered, like a code that only he deemed worthy of being read. There were also traces of paranoia. Covered mirrors, doors locked from the inside, and notes about people who watched too much. The victim's mind seemed to live in a constant state of alert, as if always playing chess with the world. but the opponent was invisible, and perhaps non-existent. The game was against himself. This profile reminded me of cases where the environment itself becomes complicit in the crime. When the mind builds a labyrinth, sometimes it gets lost inside it. And if this house was designed to protect secrets, perhaps the greatest secret is the creator himself. The victim was not just a victim. He was also the architect of the mystery. The second room resembled an endless corridor, with doors numbered 1 through 9. Each had an enigmatic inscription, like a riddle waiting to be solved. Choosing the wrong door wasn't just a mistake, it was a trap. I entered number 3, guided by a logic that mixed mathematics and intuition. Inside, the floor moved. Literally, it was a game of choices, and each decision revealed a hidden consequence. The next door required me to solve a riddle about time and regret. What passes without returning, but leaves eternal marks? I answered decision. The door opened, but behind it, a mirror. And in the reflection, it wasn't just me. It was someone who had been there before, and left something behind. The walls began to narrow, as if the room were testing my endurance. A panel appeared with 3 buttons: truth, lie, silence. I chose silence. The floor stopped moving. Sometimes, saying nothing is the most powerful response. But there, the silence seemed to carry a weight, as if someone had been punished for talking too much. I left the room with the feeling that every choice I made was being recorded, not by machines, but by someone who knew my mind. The labyrinth wasn't physical, it was psychological. And if I wanted to find the killer, I would have to keep playing, even without knowing the rules. I began to notice that the objects in the house weren't just there for aesthetics, they spoke. A mirror in the hallway reflected words that weren't written anywhere. A crooked picture revealed, behind the frame, a sequence of numbers. For 731, and the books on the shelf? All opened to the same page, with underlined passages that, together, formed a sentence. He lies better when he's silent. It was as if someone had deliberately left a trail, but only for those who knew where to look. The messages weren't on paper, they were in the subtext, in the reflections, in the absences. A lamp blinked in Morse code, and when I deciphered it, it said, "She knows." But who was she? And what exactly did she know? The house seemed to want me to ask. In the basement, I found a box of old letters, all written in the same firm handwriting. Some were in different languages, others in simple codes, like letter substitutions. But one caught my attention, a letter with no recipient, containing the phrase, "The culprit is among those who pretend not to know." That changed everything. The investigation wasn't about discovering, it was about recognizing. Each clue led me to another, as if the house were guiding me along an invisible script. And the further I got, the more I felt someone was testing me. It wasn't just about logic, it was about perception. And if I wanted to find the killer, I would have to see beyond the obvious, and perhaps even beyond myself. The third room resembled an interrogation room, but with no one to interrogate. In the center, a chair faced a screen, and around it, speakers embedded in the walls. As soon as I sat down, voices began to emerge, recordings of testimonies, confessions, well-told lies. The rule was clear: distinguish what was true, what was manipulation, and what was disguised silence. A mental game, with no room for error. The voices came from different people, but they all spoke of the same figure, the victim. Some said he was brilliant, others that he was dangerous. One voice, in particular, caught my attention, calm, firm, almost hypnotic. He knew too much, and that made him unbearable. It was a sentence laden with resentment, and perhaps guilt. But who said it? The screen began to display distorted images, like jumbled memories. Each time I got a truth right, the image became clearer. When I got it wrong, everything went dark. It was as if the house was punishing me for not seeing the obvious. But the obvious there was an illusion. The truth was hidden in the pauses, in the tones, in the subtext. And I needed to listen with more than just my ears. Finally, one last recording surfaced. A voice I recognized, my own, from an old case where the victim was also involved. The connection was deeper than I'd imagined. What if this truth game wasn't just about him, but also about me? The house seemed to know this, and it was taking me to the next level. 3 names frequently surfaced in the coded clues. Victor Lang, the victim's former business partner, Helena Voss, a distant niece, and Dr. Emil Hartmann, a therapist specializing in complex trauma. Each had a reason to be there, but none seemed willing to tell everything. Victor was cold calculating and had lost money in shady dealings with the victim. Helena, on the other hand, was a shadow. She appeared in photos, but never in official records. Dr. Hartmann intrigued me. His methods were controversial, and some patients reported experiences bordering on psychological abuse. He said the mind only heals when it is broken. And the victim? It was his oldest patient. Their meetings took place in his own mansion, in sessions that lasted for hours. What was therapy, after all? Healing or manipulation? Victor denied any involvement, but his words were too measured, like someone rehearsing the truth. Helena, on the other hand, seemed lost, but there was something in her eyes, a contained anger, like someone who has carried secrets for too long. And Dr. Hartmann? He denied nothing. He only smiled, as if he already knew the end of the game. 3 pieces, 3 versions. None reliable. I began to cross-reference the accounts with the objects found. Each one left traces, even without realizing it. And if the mansion were a stage, they were the actors. But who wrote the script? The answer wasn't just in the words. It was in the pauses, the glances, the contradictions. And I was about to discover what each one was trying to hide. On the 3rd night inside the mansion, I began to notice things that didn't add up. Objects I had left in one place appeared in another. A book that had been closed was now open to the exact page where a sentence accused me. You lie too. I thought it was just tiredness, but the pattern was clear. Someone or something was interacting with me. And it wasn't just the past. During the early morning hours, I heard footsteps upstairs. I cautiously went up, but found no one. Only a chair rocking by itself, and an open window that I was sure I had closed. The wind carried a strange sound, like whispers in a language I didn't recognize. The mansion not only held secrets, it whispered them, as if wanting to be heard, but not understood. The cameras I installed to record the rooms started malfunctioning. One of them recorded a figure standing motionless in the hallway for 17 seconds, staring at the wall. When I went to check, there was no one there. But on the floor, a shoe print that wasn't mine, and a puzzle piece I hadn't seen before. The house was playing games with me, and I was losing control. I began to question whether the events were real or if my mind was being affected. The mansion seemed to know exactly where to touch me to destabilize me. What if this was part of the plan? What if the killer didn't just want to hide their identity, but also turn me into part of the mystery? The answer, perhaps, lay in the next room. With each step inside that mansion, something within me began to unravel. It wasn't just the mystery that consumed me. It was the echo of an old case, a mistake that still haunts me. The victim in that other case was also brilliant, manipulative, and I didn't see what was right before my eyes. Guilt doesn't disappear with time. It settles in silently, waiting for the right moment to reappear. The mansion seemed to know this. Each enigma led me to a memory I preferred to keep buried. A name, a phrase, a choice I made that cost me more than I was willing to admit. I began to wonder if I was there to solve a crime or to confront my own ghosts. What if the murderer knew this? What if he was using my story against me? The emotional weight began to affect my logic. I made a simple calculation error, hesitated before an obvious clue. The mind, when overloaded, doesn't think, it reacts. And I was reacting too much. The house wasn't just a setting. It was a mirror. And each room reflected a part of me that I didn't want to see, but that I needed to face. It was at that moment that I realized perhaps the greatest challenge wasn't finding the culprit, but maintaining my sanity. Because when the investigation mixes with grief, the line between professional and personal disappears. And I was about to cross that line, without knowing if I would be able to return. The fourth room was unlike any other. In the center, a board with gold and black pieces, each marked with words like lie, forgiveness, omission, justice. Next to it, a card with instructions, build the path of truth without falling into guilt. It was a moral game, where each move revealed a choice made or avoided. And I would have to play. I started by positioning the pieces based on the decisions I made throughout the investigation. But the board reacted. When I chose justice over forgiveness, a light went out. When I opted for omission instead of lies, a door closed. It was as if the house was judging me. And each choice I made brought me closer to, or further away from, the truth. The last piece I placed was guilt. And at that moment, the board lit up. A secret drawer opened, revealing a cassette tape recording. The voice was that of the victim, talking about regrets, wrong decisions, and a plan that spiraled out of control. Guilt is a labyrinth, and I built every wall. That wasn't just a confession. It was a map. The entire room seemed designed to provoke introspection. It wasn't about who killed, but about why someone would be driven to kill. What if the killer wasn't just a culprit, but a consequence? The next door opened slowly, as if knowing the player was ready for the next level. It was in the attic that everything turned upside down. Among old boxes and covered furniture, I found an old tape recorder that was still working. The tape inside played a voice I had heard before, the victim's. But the content wasn't a farewell. It was a plan. If you're listening to this, it's because the game has begun, and I'm still playing. The idea that the victim was alive hit me like a punch. What if it was all staged? A test? The recording talked about manipulation, about creating a narrative that would confuse even the most experienced. Death is just a piece. The board is bigger. It was as if he had foreseen my every move and was watching me. I returned to the main room and examined the body again. There were subtle inconsistencies, the rigidity, the temperature, even the position. Nothing matched a recent corpse. What if it was a mannequin? Or someone sedated? Doubt began to erode my logic. The investigation was no longer about a crime. It was about a charade. And I was the protagonist without knowing it. The mansion then ceased to be merely a setting. It became the stage for a mind that wanted to prove something. But what? That it could deceive an investigator? That the truth is malleable? Or that death there was just another game move? The next clue was about to show me that the game was far from over. The photo I found in the first room came rushing back to my mind. The face next to the victim was someone I investigated years ago, a case that ended badly. At the time, I couldn't prove anything, but I always knew something was wrong. And now, there he was, involved again, as if the past had somehow caught up with me. The mansion wasn't just a setting. It was a reunion. I went through my old files and confirmed. The name was Elias Mendez, a born manipulator, involved in psychological fraud and mind games with his own patients. I never managed to arrest him, but he disappeared shortly after the last interrogation. And now, his face emerged like a forgotten piece that finally fit. The question was he behind it? Or was he just another victim? The connection between Elias and the current victim seemed profound. Both were fascinated by control, by games, by manipulation. What if this mansion was a joint creation? An experiment? I began to see patterns that previously seemed random. Repeated phrases, recurring symbols, even the style of the riddles. It was as if someone was trying to tell me, you've been here before. You just didn't realize it. This connection shook me more than I'd like to admit. Because if Elias was involved, then everything I thought I knew about this case could be wrong. What if the real goal wasn't to uncover a crime, but to put me inside it? The next clue seemed poised to show me that the past doesn't just come back, it takes its toll. The fifth room was completely white, without furniture, without windows. In the center, a tall mirror, framed by symbols I had seen in other riddles. As I approached, the reflection showed not only my image, It showed versions of myself at different moments in the investigation. Each expression, each look, seemed to carry a question. Who are you when no one is watching? Next to the mirror, a panel displayed a riddle. Identity is what remains when everything is taken away. I solved it mentally, and a light came on behind the mirror. The wall opened, revealing a secret room with the victim's personal belongings, clothes, letters, recordings. But the most disturbing thing was finding a mask, identical to the victim's face, and a note, "Truth wears many skins." I began to understand that the killer didn't just want to hide his identity. He wanted to question mine. The mirror showed not only who I was, but who I could be. What if the whole game was about that? About confusing the investigator to the point of making him doubt himself? The mansion didn't reveal answers, it planted doubts. And I was full of them. Before leaving, I looked in the mirror one more time. My reflection blinked. But I didn't blink. That wasn't just a trick of the light. It was a warning. The killer was near, perhaps closer than I imagined. And the next step would lead me to the final confrontation. The last room was a circular library, with bookshelves that went from floor to ceiling. In the center, an armchair turned its back. As I approached, the chair slowly turned. And there he was, Elias Mendez. Alive, calm, as if everything were under control. "You made it this far, John. But did you understand the game?" he said, with a smile that didn't match the situation. He invited me to sit down. On the table was a board game with pieces identical to those in the room of guilt. "Let's play one last time. If you win, you take the truth. If you lose, you take the weight." It was a psychological challenge, where each move revealed a memory, a choice, a flaw. Elias didn't want to run away. He wanted to prove that the mind can be molded, even mine. During the game, he revealed details of the plan. The victim was an accomplice, but something got out of control. Elias took command and turned everything into an experiment. The truth isn't what you discover, John. It's what you accept. The final move presented me with a choice. Reveal everything or leave the mystery intact. And at that moment, I realized that perhaps there was no right answer. Before leaving, Elias handed me a sealed letter. "Open it when you're ready to understand." I didn't try to arrest him. There was no proof, only words. And words, there were weapons. The mansion fell silent again. But the game, I knew, wasn't over yet. Back in the main hall, I found the letter Elias had given me. I opened it cautiously. Inside, a single sentence: "You passed the test. But you still don't know what was being tested." The mansion was in absolute silence, as if it had fulfilled its purpose. I looked around and realized that everything there, every room, every clue, wasn't about the crime. It was about me. As I was leaving, a new letter awaited me, pinned to the gate. Now comes the real game. There was no signature, but the paper had the same type of ink as the first letter. It was as if all of that had been just an introduction, a prologue, and the real mystery was about to begin. The feeling was clear. I didn't solve the case. I was chosen. As I drove back to the city, I went over every detail. Nothing seemed definitive. The victim, the killer, the accomplices, they could all be pieces of something bigger. What if the crime was just a distraction? A smokescreen for something deeper? The mansion didn't give me answers. It gave me questions. And now, I needed to decide what to do with them. The game isn't over. It's just changed phases. And if I want to continue, I'll have to accept that not all truth comes with proof. Some come with scars, and others with invitations. The next step? To discover who's behind the cards, and why, among so many, they chose my mind. As I left the mansion behind, I felt that something had changed, not in the case, but in me. The investigation led me down paths that weren't in the books, nor in the reports. It was like walking through a mirror and encountering versions of myself I never wanted to face. The truth there didn't come with evidence. It came with questions, and some of them still resonate. I thought about all the cases I've solved, the victims, the culprits, the stories left behind. But this one wasn't about justice. It was about identity, about what defines us when everything is taken away. The mansion didn't give me answers. It gave me a labyrinth. And perhaps the only way out is to keep walking, even without knowing where it leads. The final letter said the real game was only just beginning. And if that's true, then this investigation was just the first act. A test. A provocation. And I was chosen not for being the best, but for being the most vulnerable. Because sometimes it's in vulnerability that the mind reveals its strength. And I was about to find that out. As I drove, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The mansion was still there, motionless, silent. But something told me she wasn't finished with me. And that soon, another letter would arrive. Another invitation. Another puzzle. And when that happens, I'll be ready. Or, at least, trying to be. The next morning, while I was organizing my notes, a new letter arrived. No envelope, no return address. Just a sentence written in the same red ink as the first. You passed the test. Now comes the real game. The paper was folded like a puzzle piece. And on the back, an address. A place I knew well, too well perhaps. The address led to an old, disused psychiatric hospital where I investigated a case more than 10 years ago. A place where logic seemed to bend to madness. And now, someone wanted me to go back there. The letter didn't say when or why, only that the game continued, and that I was part of it, whether I liked it or not. As I examined the puzzle piece, I realized it fit perfectly with one of the others I'd found in the mansion, as if everything had been connected from the beginning. The mansion, Elias, the victim, the riddles, it was all part of a larger plan. What if the next step wasn't just an investigation, but a revelation? I put the letter away, took a deep breath, and looked at the map. The hospital was just a few hours away. What if what awaited me was more than just a new case? Maybe it was the answer to everything I still don't understand. Or the beginning of something that will change everything. Whatever it is, I'm going. Because when mystery calls, I listen. After everything I experienced inside that mansion, one thing became clear. Not every mystery needs to be solved to teach us something. Sometimes, the true enigma lies in how we react to the unknown. What do we do when logic fails, when the truth hides behind choices we don't know if they were ours or imposed upon us? The investigation showed me that the human mind is the greatest labyrinth that exists. And if you've made it this far, you may have realized that this case isn't just about me. It's about you too. About the pieces you try to fit into your own life. About the rooms you avoid entering, the mirrors you don't look at, the games you play without realizing it. The truth may be closer than it seems, and more disguised than you imagine. So, before you leave this video, think, what is your puzzle? What are you trying to put together, even without knowing the final picture? And if this investigation made you reflect, then it served its purpose. Because the mystery doesn't end when we find answers. It continues when we start asking the right questions. If you want to follow the upcoming investigations, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's much more coming, and who knows, the next case might be closer than you think.